In a quiet town tucked between rolling hills and dense forests, a small diner buzzed with life. The morning sun spilled through the windows, catching the bustling waitresses as they rushed from table to table. Amid this warmth, Sarah sat alone in a booth, scrolling her phone. She barely noticed Jason, her boyfriend of 2 years, slide into the seat across from her. Jason said, shifting nervously. His eyes darted to the crowded diner, then back to Sarah, but Sarah was too wrapped up in her social media feeds. She waved him off, her attention glued to the colorful images on her screen. "Maybe later," she replied, barely looking up. Jason's face fell, but he brushed it off, forcing a smile. "All right, just wanted to know. Sorry, I'm busy," she interrupted, still tapping her phone. The words hung awkwardly in the air between them like something unspoken. After a few moments of silence, Jason sighed and picked at his pancake. He tried to shake off the feeling, but a knot tightened in his stomach. He couldn't shake the sense that something was wrong. Days turned into weeks and life continued. Jason often tried to talk to Sarah, to share his thoughts, but she would always pull out her phone or get lost in her worries. She would ask, her face lighting up with curiosity, but when he would respond, expressing his thoughts, Sarah's focus drifted and he felt unseen. It was an ordinary Friday when everything changed. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a soft glow over the town. Jason had just finished an early shift at his job when he received a call from a friend. There had been an incident at the nearby college, something serious. People were talking and soon the media would be on it. His friend asked, concern lacing her voice. Jason's heart raced. He switched on the news, and what flashed across the screen sent chills down his spine. There it was, his school, the one he had loved attending. The familiar sights now marred by chaos, law enforcement cars flashing their lights and students crying, scrambling for safety. His thoughts spiraled. Was anyone he knew hurt? His mind turned to his younger sister, Anna, who was still a student there. Panic surged through him, and he shot a quick message to Sarah. "Can you turn on the news?" When Sarah finally looked up again, a full 30 minutes had passed. She hadn't noticed any messages or alerts. Instead, she had been lost in the world of influencers, scrolling past countless posts. Jason asked, urgency spilling from his voice. Sarah looked confused. "What?" She seemed annoyed. "Turn on the TV," he urged, his hands trembling slightly. Finally glancing at the screen, her face paled. The images were shocking. Students running, their faces ashen with fear, the dark aura of uncertainty enveloping the place they used to love. Jason's heart sank deeper into despair. He jumped to his feet, instantly forgetting the diner, the warmth, the pancakes. His entire world had shifted. As they rushed back to his apartment, Sarah finally saw the seriousness etched on Jason's face. It was there, a layer of worry that she rarely caught. She wondered why she didn't notice it before. When they arrived, Jason's hands were shaking as he called his sister. No answer. It felt like forever until he tried again, and still there was nothing. The media helicopters circled overhead, invasive and loud. Their blades felt like they were slicing through the quiet panic enveloping him. Inside his phone, the screen buzzed with notifications. Friends shared their fears, news reports rolled in, and phone calls flooded in from family. Jason's chest felt tight, as if something heavy was pressing down, squeezing his breath. He finally asked Sarah, trying to keep the desperation from his voice. I was just busy," she stammered, her eyes downcast. The moment passed, but it weighed heavily. "It's serious, Sarah." Finally, as more images cycled on the screen, they saw riot police on the college campus, their faces obscured by helmets. A shot of the students fleeing, some tripping and falling, sent a shiver down Jason's spine. This was unimaginable. His sister was caught in this chaos. And then out of nowhere, news broke of a suspect, a name, a face. Jason's heart dropped. He recognized it. A former classmate, someone who had always seemed off. No one could understand the depths of despair and loneliness that had consumed him. It was a tragedy unfolding before their eyes. The room fell silent as they realized what it meant. The weight of the unfolding situation pressed upon them like a cloud, a storm gathering right before the downpour. They needed to act. Jason grabbed his keys. "We need to go." Sarah hesitated, glancing at her phone. "But staying here isn't an option. We have to be there for Anna or for anyone who needs support." His voice broke, and he knew he was begging now, a voice cracking under too much pressure. Reluctantly, she nodded, fear etched on her face. They stepped outside, and the world outside felt different. There was an electric tension in the air. The sound of sirens wailed in the distance, mingling with the shouts and cries from the gathering crowd. When they reached campus, they were met with a sea of students, parents, and faculty, all reaching for answers. Jason pushed through, adrenaline guiding him. Sarah followed, her heart racing. They turned a corner, and before them lay a scene of chaos, throngs of students leaning into each other, news anchors shouting from behind cameras. And then Jason saw it, a group of anxious faces huddled together, clutching their phones. He murmured to himself, emotions welling up inside him. His eyes scanned the crowd, searching, hoping. In the distance, Jason spotted movement, a girl, familiar features, a sense of belonging amidst the turmoil. It was Anna, emerging from a cluster of students, visibly shaken but safe. Relief washed over him, and he sprinted forward, Sarah close behind. He called, his voice breaking through the noise. She looked up, and in that instant they locked eyes. She rushed into his arms, and Jason held her tightly, not wanting to let go. "I was so scared," she whispered, trembling. Tears slipped down Jason's cheeks, blurring the chaos around them. "You're okay now." Sarah watched from a distance, her heart heavy. She felt the connection, the bond of family, forged through fear and love. It was a moment she wished she could share fully, but the sharp edge of her distractions began to sink in. She had been missing these deeper connections, and it stung her to realize it. As the crowd began to disperse, the media descended like a swarm. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, and the air buzzed with a mix of relief, anger, and confusion. They were all trying to piece together the story, but within that chaos, something inside Sarah shifted. For so long, she had overlooked Jason's feelings, dismissing his questions as trivial. Now she stood witness to a stronger emotion, the power of connection, of being fully present when it mattered most. In a moment of clarity, she approached Jason and Anna, and in that instant, the world around them faded away. She reached for Jason's hand, and he turned to her, confusion in his eyes. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice steady despite the clamor. "I should have listened." The words were heavy, but they were true. Jason, still holding Anna close, nodded. "It's okay." He gestured to the chaos around. "Has changed everything." Anna's eyes glistened as she looked between Jason and Sarah. Yeah, a reminder. The weight of the day pressed in on them, and their silence turned into a connection deeper than words. They found comfort in the warmth of each other, the loud world outside replaced by their soft gathering. And in that moment, with the media trying to understand this tragedy, Sarah knew she would never overlook another question, another feeling. Because underneath it all, life is fragile, and too often we forget to pay attention. Together, they stepped back into the crowd, three souls intertwined in the face of adversity, ready to face whatever came next together. The world might remain chaotic, but they had learned the importance of truly being seen, of truly being heard, and that realization would bind them closer, no matter what tomorrow brought. Amid the hustle and bustle of the city, it happened. An enormous crash echoed through the streets, followed by a silence so thick it felt palpable. Cameras flashed and sirens wailed as people rushed to the scene, eager for answers while fear crackled in the air. But one person stood still, engrossed in her own world, oblivious to the chaos unfolding nearby. Emily sat in her cozy apartment, scrolling endlessly through her phone. The glow of the screen lit up her face, while a playlist of mundane tasks ran through her mind. She had just wrapped up a stressful week at work, and all she wanted was a quiet evening. She glanced at the notifications from her boyfriend Mark, piled up one after another, each one asking for just a bit of her attention. He texted first. "Hey, I know you're busy, but I need you." He followed up. Emily's brow furrowed. She didn't want to be bothered. She was trapped in her bubble of Instagram trends and TikTok dances, purely focused on her own life. "I'll get to it later," she mumbled. What could be so important? Outside her window, people shouted, trying to make sense of the collapse at the nearby construction site. News anchors were already at the scene, cameras poised to capture every moment, but she was oblivious. Later that evening, the chaos continued to bubble in the streets while Emily remained glued to her phone. Mark, visibly shaken, watched the updates roll in about the crash, the collapse of what was supposed to be a high-rise, where workers and locals alike had gathered in curiosity that day. People were missing, and the media frenzy only intensified. When he finally mustered the courage to call her, his voice caught in his throat. "Emily, I can't get through to anyone." She barely looked up from her screen. She asked, her words lacking genuine concern. Another sigh came from him, laced with vulnerability. "People are trapped under the rubble, Em." The moment tugged at something within her, but the allure of her phone kept pulling her back. "Just a minute, okay?" His silence spoke volumes. That night, the news filled with disturbing reports, stories of heroes pulling people out, families waiting to hear if their loved ones were safe. Emily kept scrolling, rarely glancing at what truly mattered. Her indifference wrapped around her like a warm blanket, shielding her from the reality outside her window. But minutes turned into hours, and phone calls turned into texts of heartbreak. Emily tossed her phone down, finally feeling a flicker of annoyance. Why is everyone so dramatic? Just wait. But deep down, the voice nagged at her. What if things were worse? The next day, Mark didn't text at all. The silence between them felt thick, almost suffocating. Emily knew she should reach out, but her stubborn pride held her back. She turned up the volume on her show, drowning out thoughts she didn't want to confront. Then came the day when the news broke wide open. They had found a survivor, a worker pulled from the wreckage, bruised but alive. The media rushed onto the scene, eager for interviews and details. This was what they lived for. Emily shouted, suddenly urgent, but the response she got was empty. The realization hit hard when she remembered his last message, asking for a call about the workers. She had ignored it. She picked up her phone, fingers trembling. Silence followed. The news feed continued to scroll, showing images of families rejoicing and breaking into tears. They had found others too suddenly. The injured weren't just numbers, they were faces, they were people. Emily scrolled down, reading comments from worried individuals, friends desperate to hear from loved ones, and community members rallying to offer support. For a moment, guilt washed over her as she involuntarily held her breath. Finally, she got a reply from Mark after hours of worry. "I'm okay." The words stung her, leaving a bitter taste in her mouth. Steeling herself, she tried to reach out. "I'm sorry, but his text cut off her apology. "Call me when you can really talk, Emily." With a heavy heart, she put down her phone, feeling the weight of everything she had overlooked. She opened social media again, and there it was, news anchors reporting live, and crowds huddled together, faces filled with anguish and relief. Suddenly, Emily found herself at a crossroads. She could continue to live in her bubble or step outside it just for a moment. Her hands trembled as she took a deep breath and left her apartment. The moment Emily stepped into the street, the sights and sounds hit her like a tidal wave. Helpless families stood outside, clutching photos of missing loved ones. Distress wrapped around each face as people supported one another, sharing experiences. The atmosphere felt alive, charged with fear and hope intertwined. She called out, her voice fading into the growing noise, and then she saw him. Standing near a news van, surrounded by the buzz of reporters and camera crew, his expression darkened by worry and exhaustion. He was out there in the crowd, fighting the panic that simmered underneath his calm exterior. She hurried towards him. She shouted again, and relief washed over him as he spotted her. He replied, moving forward, but that sense of relief quickly crumbled as he took a step back, arms crossed tightly. "You came," he said, though his tone was heavy with doubt. "I'm sorry for earlier." "I didn't realize how serious this was," she admitted, glancing around at the wreckage, the reporters, and the waves of emotion flooding the area. "What's happening?" "They're waiting." His voice trembled as he spoke. "Some people would just give up hope." But Emily took a deep breath, finally accepting the gravity of their reality. "I should have listened to you." Mark softened slightly. "It's all right," he said, but the pain lingered in his eyes. "You weren't the only one trying to escape." Together they stood under the haze of uncertainty, surrounded by the fear that had gripped the community. Peering through the crowd, Mark spotted a news anchor preparing for a live report. "I need to talk to them," he urged Emily. "Okay, I'm right here," she assured him, gripping his arm for reassurance. As the camera rolled, Mark stepped into the frame. "I'm here with friends who are still unaccounted for." Emily stood silently by his side, her heart pounding as she watched him brave the spotlight, recounting the names of those still missing. Each name hung in the air, a reminder of lives intertwined, families shattered, and moments overlooked. The camera panned back and forth between Mark and the crowd's faces brimming with emotion, longing, despair, and hope. It was raw, real, and completely gripping. Then, as a glimmer of hope flickered, one of the rescue workers hurried into view, dust patrol gear glistening under the sun. "We've got more survivors." Cheers erupted, punctuated by tears. In that moment, the weight of everything, of neglect, of disconnection, began to slip away. Emily felt something shift in her heart as she pressed closer to Mark. A crowd erupted with joy, embracing survivors as they emerged from the rubble. The chaos turned to celebration. Families met each other with tears of relief as loved ones returned. And amidst the chaos, Emily began to realize that this wasn't just about her. When Mark finished the interview, he turned to her, his eyes searching. She nodded, finally feeling the courage to face the reality she had once overlooked. But as the night went on, the media buzzed outside, every station eager for the next glimpse, the next piece of hope. They pressed for interviews, capturing the raw emotion of the families, transforming moments of despair into compelling stories for their viewers. Emily stayed by Mark's side, finally understanding what it meant to truly witness the world, the pain, the struggle, the fleeting moments of joy. Sometimes life could change in an instant, and it was easy to overlook the important things amidst the noise. As they walked home, hand in hand, Mark paused, looking at her with intent. "You know, I understand why you didn't see it before. Life pulls us into different directions, and it's easy to lose focus." Tears brimmed in Emily's eyes, not from sadness, but from the realization that she had once glanced past the important questions and connections in her life. She asked, "I want to open my eyes." And in that moment, as they shared a quiet understanding, Emily knew she'd never overlook another moment again. Together, they stood ready to face whatever life had in store, no longer bound by the distractions that had once consumed them. Because in a world filled with chaos, it was connection, the kind forged through understanding and empathy, that turned the pain into power, transforming what could have been lost into something greater. And outside, as the media continued to capture the stories that emerged from the wreckage, Emily and Mark began to write their own. The words hung in the air between them, sharp and heavy, as if the room itself held its breath. Jess stared at the floor, her heart pounding as she felt the weight of Matt's disappointment. They were sitting on the couch in their small apartment, the glow of the TV casting flickering shadows across their faces. Jess was scrolling through her phone, half listening to Matt as he shared something that clearly mattered to him. Yet her eyes remained glued to the screen, enthralled by the constant stream of notifications. He snapped, breaking through her haze. "I'm talking about my job interview tomorrow." She barely looked up. "I know, but it's just an interview, right?" Her voice sounded distant, even to her. Matt sighed, frustration bubbling just beneath the surface. He wanted her support, her focus. But here he was, competing with the buzz of social media and celebrity gossip. Jess had her own worries and distractions, and it felt like she was always too busy to truly hear him. The atmosphere between them felt electric, charged with unspoken tension. Then, as if the universe had decided to intervene, they heard a loud noise outside, a cacophony of shouting, the blaring of sirens, and the unmistakable sound of a crowd gathering. Jess asked, finally pulling her eyes away from her phone. "I don't know, but it doesn't sound good," Matt said, glancing out the window. The noise swelled, and an urgent curiosity pulled them both from their seats. They rushed to the window, peering through the curtains to see a crowd gathering just down the street. As vans were arriving, reporters hopping out, cameras in hand, and the atmosphere somehow felt ominous. Jess's stomach churned. Matt said, eagerness lighting up his face. Finally, something that could take him out of the shadows of his impending job interview. Maybe they'd find some excitement, or at least answers. They stepped outside, joining the throng of people drawn to the commotion. The air buzzed with anticipation, anxiety clinging to the crowd like fog. Jess glanced around, trying to make sense of the chaos. She asked, trying to suppress a sense of dread. "Only one way to find out," Matt replied, his voice steady. As they approached, they began to glimpse the scene unfolding. A young man, distraught and shaking, stood at the center of a rescue operation. He was surrounded by police officers and paramedics, but an entire section of the street was blocked off. The crowd murmured, questions flying in every direction. Jess breathed, her heart racing. Just a moment ago, she was caught in an online world, and now reality felt painfully immediate. Then Jess caught sight of the police officers, their expressions serious. She saw a few people in the crowd holding signs and shouting, demanding to know what was going on. Some were crying, others visibly anxious. Something terrible had happened. Jess asked, suddenly sensing the weight of fear creeping in. "I don't know," Matt replied, inching closer to the center of the gathering. He squeezed through the crowd, and Jess followed tightly, her heart pounding as they pushed forward. The moment they reached the front, they realized the distraught young man was none other than Matt's childhood friend, Nick. Matt shouted, rushing to his side. Nick's eyes widened in shock and relief. Matt asked, concern washing over him. As they stood there, the tension in Nick's voice was palpable. "There was an explosion at the factory. I can't find anyone. I was supposed to meet my coworkers there." The gravity of Nick's words settled heavily into Jess's gut. She looked around, the hustle and bustle of the media pressing in on them. News teams were setting up cameras, eager for a story that had just begun to unfold. Jess's heart sank further as she glanced at Matt, his expression shifting from confusion to alarm. Matt asked, his voice shaking slightly. Rubbed his hands together, eyes darting nervously. They're still trying to assess the situation. In that moment, everything shifted. The phones began buzzing, reporters were shouting for interviews, and Jess felt the air grow thick with anxiety. People were gathering, cameras flashing, and the chaos intensified. "Nick, have you talked to anyone?" Matt pressed, desperate for some kind of reassurance. "I don't know," Nick yelled back, panic rising. "They told me to leave, but I can't just sit here." Jess watched as Matt's face fell. The weight of the situation settled in. She could feel her heart racing, and suddenly her own distractions felt trivial. The stories of people trapped inside, the fear etched on Nick's face, it was all too real. Then something clicked. Jess realized all the moments she had brushed off Matt's concerns, all the times she had overlooked his questions. Here was a man facing potential loss while she had been wrapped up in her own world of distractions. The guilt washed over her. "I'm sorry, Matt," she whispered, but the words felt lost in the noise. At that moment, the local news anchor stood up and faced the camera, describing the unfolding situation. Jess felt an urge to move closer, to witness the truth of what was happening. She wanted to understand. The camera panned over to Nick as he stood at the center of the scene, surrounded by the weight of uncertainty. His face flickered across screens throughout the city, a young man grappling with fear, determination, and a desperate need to find out if his friends were okay. The news anchor's voice boomed over the crowd, describing the dangerous situation inside the factory, a place where dreams were made, now transformed into a site of despair. "Firefighters are currently assessing the structure," the anchor reported. Jess could see Nick's breath coming in quick gasps. Each heartbeat echoed a myriad of emotions: disbelief, anger, sorrow. It was a moment she wouldn't easily forget. She felt the pull of empathy churn within her as she stood close to Matt, who was evidently shaken. Jess asked quietly, her eyes filled with concern. "No," Matt shook his head, his voice low. "This could have affected so many people." With cameras rolling, a crowd began to gather around them, a sea of faces, emotions on display. The tension weighed heavy, joy, anger, fear mingling together into a shared experience. Jess marveled at the connection between strangers, united in their worries, hopes, and fears. And then, in a surprising moment of humanity, an older woman in the crowd cried out, "Does anybody have any news?" Her voice pierced the din, and within seconds, reporters rushed to her side, hoping to capture the emotional plea. Jess felt the pain radiating from the crowd like a shockwave, hitting everyone in attendance. Anguish fluttered across faces as memories flooded in. Just then, a loud crash rattled the air, followed by frantic shouts from the direction of the factory. The crowd surged, necks craning for a better view, hearts pounding as fear mingled with hope. Each person waited, grappling with the unknown. Matt yelled, determination lacing his voice. Nick shouted back, the weight of uncertainty heavy on their shoulders. Every second felt like an eternity, and Jess strained to see through the throng of people. She could see the glimmer of lights in the distance, firefighters emerging from the ruins, wielding determination and strength. One fist after another flew up in cheer, but Jess's heart sank. The first group of survivors appeared and a collective breath was held. Faces battered but alive stepped through the chaos. The crowd erupted, clapping, screaming, trying to grasp the reality of what they were witnessing. Matt grabbed Jess's hand, but his grip was shaky, unsure. Is that them? The survivors were whisked away to safety, and Jess felt the deep pain and relief wash over the crowd, a tide of emotion rising and falling like the waves. She could hardly breathe, her pulse racing as people connected in this moment of shared humanity. Then, just as Jess thought the overwhelming fear was subsiding, she saw Nick, his face twisted in anguish. "Where's my friend, Sam?" The questions hung heavy in the air, followed by a deafening silence. In an instant, the revelry gave way to uncertainty again. The cameras, once focused on the happiness of the survivors, turned toward the pain etched across Nick's face, helplessness painting every frame. Jess's heart twisted. This wasn't just a news story, it was real. She glanced at Matt, whose expression mirrored her own despair. They both wanted to comfort their friend, to lift him from this unbearable weight. A rescue worker came forward, clearly shaken. "We're still trying to get people out." The urgency in his voice was tinged with an awareness that there could be more lives at stake, trapped beneath the wreckage. Nick shouted, desperation boiling over. And then, as if pulled by an unseen thread, Jess felt a shift. This was a moment that demanded presence, a moment where concern for the wider community eclipsed personal distractions. She squeezed Matt's hand tighter and moved beside Nick, standing shoulder to shoulder with him. "You're not alone," she said softly, finding her voice. Matt nodded, mirroring what she said. "Yeah, Nick, we'll wait." For the first time, the three of them stood united in shared uncertainty. They didn't know what was going to happen next. There were still unanswered questions, but they were there for each other, unyielding as the chaos unfolded. Outside, the world raced by. Cameras continued to capture every heart-wrenching moment, but Jess felt relieved by a sense of belonging. It was bittersweet, a moment punctured by pain yet softened by connection. Each second felt significant, their lives intertwined in ways they would carry forward. As the night wore on, Jess watched Nick, each expression painted on his face becoming a part of the story, the heart of what was unfolding. She realized she had spent too long in her own world, casting shadows over those she loved. It was a different world outside her phone, a world filled with love, fear, grief, and courage. In the flickering light of the news reports, Jess finally heard everything Matt had asked before. She took a deep breath, leaning into the moment. She could reach out, open her heart, and truly listen. And as the crowd held their breath, stories unfolded, every shared sentiment weaving an intricate tapestry of resilience in the face of despair. Hope broke through, glimmering lights in the darkness, their connections shining bright. Moments folded into each other, breath after breath, until finally they heard the confirmation. More survivors, more people returning home. The relief swept through the crowd, a wave of warmth spreading as cheers erupted again, lightning sparks of hope illuminating the night. Jess turned to Matt, their eyes meeting in an unspoken understanding. No longer just the noise of her phone, now they were in the world together, the here and now. All at once, Jamie understood why Matt had wrestled with questions before. Reality had come crashing in, illuminating what truly mattered. She vowed to make room for that kind of understanding in the future. Because in moments of crisis, amidst the cacophony of life, it was connection that transformed every fear, every tear, and every unanswered question into stories of strength, bound by community and support. And together they stood, hearts entwined with the chorus of voices, united by the belief that even when darkness threatened, there was always light, a light born from seeing each other clearly. Jason's voice cut through the noise of the bustling cafe, but Sarah barely glanced up from her phone. The glow illuminated her face, filtering out the world around her. "Yeah, sure," she replied absent-mindedly, fingers scrolling through endless updates, half listening. He implored, a hint of vulnerability in his voice. "Of course," she muttered, still glued to the screen. With every word, her attention drifted further away, tethered to a world of likes and comments. Jason forced a smile, but inside he felt the familiar ache of being overlooked. This wasn't a new occurrence. More often than not, his questions and feelings drowned in her digital sea. He shook his head, trying to push past the moment. But in his heart, Jason knew this wasn't just about a simple request. The distance between them was widening, shadows lurking where warmth once resided. The weekend approached, and the air in the city felt charged with anticipation. But there was something different this Saturday. As the sun rose, casting an amber glow, Jason stood on the balcony of his apartment, staring into the distance. He felt a strange unease twisting in his gut. Little did he know, the day was about to change everything. A sharp crack suddenly pierced the air, and an explosion echoed in the distance. Moments later, sirens wailed, blaring through the streets, drawing a crowd thick with urgency. Jason's heart raced. He hurried to his phone, searching for news, but found nothing. He grabbed his jacket and rushed outside, his instincts kicking in. As he turned the corner, he saw a plume of smoke rising up, gray fingers curling into the clear sky. His stomach dropped. News teams were already setting up, reporters shouting into their microphones, struggling to get the story out. The chaos of the unfolding scene felt surreal. Panic was etched on the faces of those around him, uncertainty creeping into every whispered conversation. Jason pushed ahead, hoping to find information, hoping to help if he could. "Jason," he heard a voice call behind him. It was Sarah, finally pulling her attention away from her phone. She panted, trying to catch up. "I don't know, but it sounds serious. We need to figure this out," he replied, his heart racing as he moved through the crowd. They squeezed past the chaos until they reached the front lines. There, in the midst of a gathering crowd, stood Anna, their mutual friend and Jason's younger sister. Her face was pale, fear radiating from every fiber of her being. Jason exclaimed, rushing to her side. She wiped her tears and shook her head, her breath hitching. There was an explosion at the factory. Every heartbeat rang in Jason's ears as he processed her words. The factory. That was where several people he knew worked, including his close friends. Anna nodded, her voice quaking. Jason turned to Sarah. "We have to find out what's happening." She agreed, but a sense of dread hung in the air, pulling at the edges of her mind. As they moved through the crowd, reporters rushed past, vying for a scoop. Jason could feel the heat of the situation growing. His heart pounded loud enough to drown out everything else, but he didn't care. All that mattered was finding out if his friends were safe. Suddenly, he spotted one of his old coworkers, Sarah, a fellow employee at the factory. He yelled, waving to get her attention. She turned, eyes wide with disbelief. "Jason, you can't be here. What happened?" he pressed, fear choking his voice. I don't know." Sarah looked away, tears pooling in her eyes. Panic rose like a tide within him. Jason declared, determination fueling him. Sarah grabbed his arm, desperation etched on her face, but his mind was racing. He turned to Anna and Sarah, the fear in their eyes reflected back at him. "Let's do this," Anna said, her voice steadier than it had been. As they moved closer to the factory, the crowd began to thicken, tension wrapping around them like a coiled spring. Journalists pushed to get the latest update, recording everything, the fear, the hope, the uncertainty. That was when they heard it, a loud crash from within the structure followed by a strong shockwave that rattled the ground beneath their feet. Everyone fell silent, all eyes fixed on the blackened edifice. Gasps echoed, fear soaring high above the cacophony. Shouted a firefighter as he passed the crowd, determination etched in his brow. "We're trying to rescue anyone we can," but Jason was undeterred. His heart raced, instinct took over. "We can't just wait." In that moment, he locked eyes with Sarah. For the first time, he saw something shift within her. The phone, the distractions, none of it mattered anymore. The chaos around them surged, pressing and pulling like the ocean. "I'm with you," Sarah finally said, taking a deep breath, her resolve fortifying. As they pressed closer to the factory, Jason felt the heartbeat of humanity around him, a symphony of emotion and connection. It was staggering, their once fragmented lives now woven together by fear and hope. Just then, a news reporter approached, shouting into the camera. "We have confirmation that several workers are still trapped inside the factory. Details are unclear, but rescue teams are doing everything they can." Jason saw Anna clench her fists, her eyes glued to the camera. He felt a pang of sympathy. This was more than just a news story. This was about lives at stake. He heard Matt, their friend, calling from the edge of the crowd. He rushed over, breathless. "I heard what happened. Is it true?" "Yeah," Jason admitted, his heart sinking. "We're trying to find out if anyone's trapped." "I'm in," Matt said, and without hesitation, the four of them stood united. As they faced the factory, the air pulsed with hope and dread. The crowd quieted as rivulets of uncertainty flowed through them, fingers entwined in one collective heartbeat. "Stay safe," the firefighter shouted, voice carrying over the chaos. As the responders filed in, the crowd erupted in cheers, an unexpected wave of support crashing over them. But Jason felt the weight of it all pressing down with a relentless force. With every second that ticked by, lives hung in the balance. He urged Anna and Sarah, leading them through throngs of onlookers. "Wait," Sarah shouted, breaking away to grab her device as if that would somehow bridge the distance. Panic surged even higher in Jason's chest. He snapped, but even as the words left his mouth, he knew they were powerless against the storm brewing inside him. She retorted, but as she fumbled with her phone, her eyes glazed over and Jason felt her focus slip away. He pleaded, feeling that familiar sense of panic rising again, but he didn't want to fault Sarah. She was scared just like they all were. It wasn't her fault that moments so precious were often obscured by the distractions that consumed their lives. He turned back, watching the firefighters battling the flames that licked rhythmically at the air. They were brave. It took courage to step into the unknown, to fight against uncertainty. As the crowd simmered with anticipation, the tension grew unbearably thick. Jason caught sight of a family, tears tracing paths down their cheeks, holding each other tightly. This was the real impact. Within the chaos, a voice broke through the din of panic. A mother cried out, desperation thick like fog. Jason felt his heart ache, the sheer weight of it all crashing down on him. This was more than numbers or headlines, these were lives intertwined. he shouted, stepping forward, but just then a loud crack echoed through the air, sending shiver down the spines of everyone present. The reporters instinctively turned to capture the moment, but more importantly, everyone felt it, the looming threat of tragedy deepening. People gasped, some screaming as they realized uncertainty and fear didn't find distinction. They mingled together in a potent blend of emotion, the human experience laid bare. As adrenaline coursed through his veins, Jason turned to Anna, whose face was pinched in worry. He urged her, feeling a fierce protectiveness rise. Matt stood at his side, steadfast. A flicker of hope caught in Jason's throat. The crowd drew tighter, wishing for any news, clinging to every update like a lifeline. And finally, after what felt like an eternity, a firefighter emerged. He called, breaking through the tension. Cheers erupted, a chorus of relief washing over them, but there were still lives at stake, the uncertainty thick with longing. Jason looked at Sarah, the look of worry etched on her face, but she was there. She had joined him in the chaos, finally present in a way he'd been longing for. As battalions of emergency responders surged back, he could see the grit and determination on their faces. They were risking it all, and in that moment, Jason found himself amidst a powerful realization. Life was never guaranteed, and every moment mattered. Standing together, a family forged from shared struggle, they united in a moment where fear collided with love. Every second felt significant, every heartbeat synced to the same pulse as the restlessness of life continued. A profound awareness rippled through the group, illuminating hidden truths about friendship, loyalty, and the importance of being present. As night descended, the glow from the factory illuminated the crowd, colors swirling amidst the chaos. They could feel life's fragility and strength intermingling, tearing apart distractions, making room for clarity. Minutes turned into hours, but hope remained strong, unchanged. As the firefighters emerged yet again, pulling another survivor from the jaws of fear, the crowd erupted once more in cheers, an electric wave of emotion filling the air. No longer mere spectators, Jason and Sarah found a strength within themselves they'd never fully acknowledged before. With every passing moment, they embraced a purpose far greater than themselves. Even when the news cameras buzzed around them, capturing the stories that would echo through every outlet, they focused on the truth seeping through the cracks of fear. Each person, each story wove a tapestry that brought life into focus, urging them all to remember. Together we can weather anything, Jason expressed, his voice firm. In that moment, laughter broke through the waves of uncertainty as more survivors emerged. Relief poured in, glowing brightly against the dark horizon. They cheered, clapped, held each other tightly, and through shared humanity realized that sometimes the fear of loss could reveal the beauty of love. As they stood hand in hand, Jason understood the essence of life, the importance of truly listening to each other. The distractions faded into the background, replaced by genuine connection that rang through with clarity and love. And as they faced the future, unified against life's chaos, they vowed to keep showing up for one another, promising that no question would go unanswered and no moment would be overlooked again. Because sometimes it takes the loudest moments of chaos to shine a light on what truly matters, the bonds we forge, the love we show, and the strength we share, reminding us all that we are never alone. Sarah asked, peeking through the curtains of her small apartment. Her heart raced, not from concern but from the anticipation of something exciting. Just a moment ago, she had been lost in her phone, scrolling through endless posts about influencer drama and celebrity gossip. But this was different. "Maybe there's been an accident," replied her boyfriend Adam, leaning back on the couch, his eyes glued to the screen of his own device. His voice was carefree, but Sarah felt a knot tightening in her stomach. "It's too early for filming," she murmured, already distracted. She swung the curtains wide open and gazed outside, searching for answers. What she saw sent a chill down her spine. A small crowd had gathered, murmuring anxiously. Camera crews were setting up, their gear stark against the fading light of the late afternoon sky. An unsettling feeling washed over her. "This looks serious," she whispered, her curiosity morphing into worry. Adam shrugged. "Probably nothing, just drama." But even as he said this, the tension hung thick in the air, binding them together in a moment of shared unease. That was when Sarah's phone buzzed a message from a friend alerting her about an explosion at the local community center. "Adam." "There's been an explosion," she exclaimed, her tone shifting from concern to urgency. His eyes widened. "What, when?" "I don't know," Sarah replied, her mind racing. Without waiting for a response, she grabbed her jacket and headed for the door. Adam hesitated but followed her, his protective instincts kicking in. They stepped outside into the cool evening air, joining the throng of people moving toward the chaos. As they approached, the reality of the situation hit them like a wave. Fire trucks, ambulances, and police cars surrounded the community center, filling the area with a sense of urgency. Sarah felt her heart race, caught between adrenaline and fear. They edged closer to the crowd, adrenaline surging through their bodies. It was chaotic. People were shouting, crying, and hugging each other. Suddenly, a desperate voice rang out from further up the street. A woman's voice cracked, echoing through the crowd. Sarah glanced at Adam, eyes wide with apprehension. "We need to know," he replied firmly. The determination in his voice ignited a fire within her, pushing aside the distractions of her previous day. They pushed through the crowd, struggling to make their way to the front where reporters were scrambling to gather information. Cameras flashed, capturing the raw emotions of the moment. Sarah could feel the weight of everyone's fear and hope pressing in on her, blending into a single pulse of anxiety and yearning. A news anchor yelled, his voice cutting through the crowd, chasing after an emergency responder hurrying past. Came the sharp reply. Sarah's mind raced, every second felt agonizingly slow, and she knew they couldn't just wait. "I have to find out if anyone is inside," she said, her resolve hardening. The moment felt monumental, and she wanted to be part of it, to bear witness. When they reached a small barricade, Sarah caught sight of someone familiar, a coworker from her job. Sarah called out, desperate for answers. "Hey," she exclaimed, relief washing over her. "I just got here." Sarah pressed, urgency spilling over. The anxiety in her chest clawed for release, and she needed answers. Jessica shook her head wide-eyed. "I don't know, I just left a meeting." Panic flickered between them like an electric current, and Sarah turned to Adam, feeling fear creep into her bones. "We need to help." Before he could reply, a loud explosion rattled the ground, echoing through the streets. Everyone jumped, hearts pounding. Several people screamed, and the crowd surged backward. But in that chaos, Sarah's mind sharpened. She could feel the weight of the moment, as if the universe had shifted, marking the significance of what was unfolding. Adam shouted, his voice barely audible over the chaos. As they braced against the tide of panic, the reporters hustled to capture the moment, feverishly documenting every emotion, every crisis unfolding before their eyes. But Sarah felt something deeper. This was more than a news story. It was a tragedy, a fabric of lives intertwined. A firefighter shouted, raising his hand to calm the crowd. "We are doing everything we can." Amid the noise, a flicker of recognition crossed Sarah's mind. This was her community, her friends, possibly her friends' lives hanging in the balance. Her voice broke, trembling with fear. The mass of emotions pressed down heavier, a combination of worry and grief mixed with the palpable hope for deliverance. This was where it counted, Sarah realized. They had to be here for each other, to show support even in the face of despair. Just then, another emergency responder rushed in, his uniform smeared with soot. He shouted, a mix of urgency and relief spilling from his lips. Cheers erupted from the crowd, a brief spark of hope igniting the tension. Sarah squeezed Adam's hand, their hearts pounding as they pushed forward, desperate to witness the moment. Every second felt fragile, unresolved. The crowd surged forward, a tide of bodies drawn to the edge of the barricade, longing to see the survivors. As the first two men emerged from the building shaken but alive, the crowd erupted into cheers and tears. Relief washed over them, but then the reality crashed in again. There were still people inside. Adrenaline coursed through Sarah, and she looked at Adam. She felt a pull deep inside, a need to act. "No, Sarah," Adam shouted, fighting against the surge of emotions, but Sarah's fear transformed into determination. The need to help bubbled up, a relentless pull that wouldn't let her go. She insisted, breaking free from his grasp. The chaos around her blurred as she stepped forward. Somehow, the boundaries of fear faded, replaced by a fierce clarity. She needed to find out if she could help, to be part of something bigger, the hope among despair. As she approached the barricade, a firefighter spotted her. He shouted, rushing forward, but in that moment she locked her eyes with his. "Please, I need to know if anyone else is in there." The firefighter hesitated, caught between protocol and the raw emotion on her face. Taking a breath, he said, "If you go in, you need to stay close to me and listen." She nodded sharply, determination burning in her gut. As they moved toward the entrance, adrenaline coursed through her veins, eclipsing doubt. The air was thick with smoke and uncertainty, but at that moment she was energized, ready to confront the chaos. Adam's voice drifted behind her, fading into the background noise of the disaster unfolding. Inside, the darkness enveloped her like a shroud. The sound of crackling flames echoed, punctuated by the distant cries of those trapped. The firefighter commanded, leading the way. They navigated the wreckage, every step steeped in anxiety. The air was heavy with heat and ash, but intertwined was an unmistakable sense of purpose. Suddenly, a voice called out from the shadows. "Help!" Sarah's heart leaped. "Yes," she called, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Over here," the voice pleaded, fragile and terrified. With the firefighter guiding her, Sarah rushed toward the sound, fighting through debris and fear. Each step felt monumental, fueled by determination and the hope that they could make a difference. They turned a corner and spotted two employees huddled under a fallen beam, fear etched into their faces. She shouted, and as they approached, her heart pounded louder, driven by urgency. One of them cried, panic gripping them tightly. The firefighter quickly assessed the situation, barking out orders. Sarah positioned herself, adrenaline fueling her strength. Together, they matched their efforts, hoisting the beam while focusing intently on their task, aware of the stakes surrounding them. With a final push, the beam lifted enough for the young men to crawl free, and the flood of relief surged through her. "You did it." As they backed out, the sounds of chaos outside rushed in. Sharp cries, distant sirens, and the steady thrum of the crowd reached their ears. They emerged into the light, stepping back into the embrace of humanity, both vulnerable and relieved. When they stepped out of the building, the crowd erupted again, cheers ringing in celebration that eclipsed despair. Sarah met Adam's gaze across the sea of faces, and in that moment she felt their worlds collide. Everything she had overlooked vanished in the shadow of something far more significant. The rescued men exclaimed, hugging Sarah tightly. Their gratitude flowed like a powerful current. Despite the wreckage around them, the warmth of connection ignited her spirit, washing over the pain of fear that had plagued the day. Adam rushed to her side, relief flooding his features. He demanded, shaking his head, but there was no anger, only awe. I was thinking I needed to be here. To help, she replied, breathless, her heart still racing. The comfort of Adam's presence anchored her as the chaos swirled like a storm around them. They watched as first responders continued their work, pulling people from the wreckage, unyielding in their commitment to save lives. But then, just as the atmosphere turned jubilant, a new wave of tension swept through the crowd. Someone cried, anxiety rippling like a current. The air thickened with uncertainty, the weight of reality heavy on everyone's shoulders. In the blink of an eye, the happiness from the rescue faded, uncertainty taking its place. As night fell, the reality of their situation continued to emerge. The media descended, capturing moments both tragic and triumphant. Each report shared stories of survival, of courage, and of the community that rallied together to support one another. Sarah stood alongside Adam, Anna, and Jessica, a sense of togetherness growing stronger in their hearts. I should have listened more, Sarah admitted quietly, her voice almost lost amid the noise. Adam nodded. As the reality of their day settled deep within them, they realized that sometimes the loudest moments revealed what mattered most, the connections they had overlooked amid life's distractions. Together, they vowed to hold on. No more brushes with indifference, no more overlooked moments. Life was a fragile gift of vibrant tapestry woven from the threads of shared experiences. As people around them embraced each other, sharing tears, laughter, and stories, Sarah felt confident, bold in her presence. They had transformed a moment of chaos into one of clarity, love breaking through in times of despair. This was their community, this was their story, and in a world where distractions often overshadowed the important questions, they had chosen to stand together in the face of uncertainty, nurturing the bonds that made each moment worth witnessing. Because in the heart of chaos, they discovered strength, resilience, and hope, paving the way for a future where no voice would go unheard and no connection would ever be overlooked again. Jenna's voice was laced with concern as she leaned closer to Lisa at their shared office desk. The morning light streamed through the window, but the warmth didn't touch the chill in the air between them. Lisa replied, her fingers tapping away at her keyboard, eyes focused on the spreadsheet in front of her. Jenna hesitated, her curiosity piqued. It's about Kyle. They say he was in an accident. Finally breaking her concentration, Lisa looked up. Something serious, a car crash. Don't know if he's going to make it, Jenna whispered, watching as the color drained from Lisa's face. His mom is a wreck. Lisa felt her heart drop. Kyle was more than just a coworker, he was a friend. They had shared countless lunches, laughter, and late nights finishing projects together. She had always admired his dedication and warmth. Jenna shrugged, her expression a mix of empathy and frustration. We've been so focused on work, the new project, the deadlines. I need to check on him. Lisa realized she had been so wrapped up in her own world that she had missed the important stuff happening around her. Her mind raced as she stood up, a sense of urgency sparking within her. Rushing out of the office, Lisa fumbled with her phone, desperately searching for information. The glowing screen illuminated her worry. She quickly scrolled through social media posts, her heart pounding. Each post only deepened her fear. News outlets were reporting on Kyle's accident, the headlines both tragic and urgent. As she rushed down the busy street, the city hummed around her, but all she could hear was the thump of her heart in her chest. When she arrived at the hospital, she stood frozen outside, a whirlwind of emotions keeping her rooted to the spot. Moments later, a news van pulled up. The media had arrived, cameras rolling, reporters hustling to gather updates. Panic ignited within her. If they were here, then this must be serious. Lisa's breath hitched as she let herself inside. The stark walls felt suffocating as she navigated through the white corridors, each step heavier than the last. She spotted Kyle's mother, frantic and disheveled, sitting in the waiting room. Lisa rushed over, concern crashing over her like a tidal wave. "Mrs.," she called out, kneeling beside her. "How is he, Mrs.?" Ellis looked up, her eyes red and puffy. "They say he's hurt badly, but they're still assessing everything," she rasped, the weight of grief hanging heavily in the air. In that moment, Lisa felt the enormity of the situation crush down upon her. She had taken these moments for granted, the laughter, the conversations, and now uncertainty loomed like a dark cloud. "I'm so sorry, I had no idea. Everyone's been so wrapped up in their own lives," Mrs. Ellis replied, her voice trembling, "even Kyle's friends." With a heavy heart, Lisa sat back on her heels, her mind racing. How had she overlooked his struggles? How had she not noticed the signs? Just then, a nurse emerged from the double doors, the weight of her expression echoing through the air. Mrs. Lisa's heart sank as she watched the nurse approach, and Mrs. Ellis stood, her hands trembling. This was the moment Lisa feared. "I'll be right here," Lisa promised softly, even as anxiety swirled in her gut. The world felt like it was spinning, each second stretching into eternity. As they spoke, the media continued buzzing with excitement outside. Lisa felt increasingly disconnected from the outside world, the sound of cameras flashing and reporters eagerly discussing the situation filtering through the sterile walls. With every report echoing through the hallway, it struck Lisa how intertwined everything felt. The media focused on the sensational aspects of Kyle's accident, the threat of injury, glimpses of his life before the tragedy. But hadn't anyone thought about his reality? Frustration simmered within her. It was a reminder of how easily people overlook what mattered. This wasn't just a news story, this was a life, a person they all knew. Eventually, Mrs. Ellis returned, her face pale and pained. "They've stabilized him for now," she said quietly, but Lisa noticed the crack in her voice. Relief washed over Lisa, but uncertainty loomed larger. She asked, her heart aching, "I don't think it's a good time, he's still unconscious." Mrs. Ellis replied gently, her words settling into the fabric of fear that surrounded them. Then an unexpected voice broke through. A reporter was standing close, not truly understanding the gravity of the moment. Lisa felt her blood boil. "This isn't a story for you to exploit." She stepped forward, her protective instincts overwhelming her. The reporter hesitated, taken aback. "I'm just doing my job. You're not supposed to add more pain," Lisa interrupted, voice firm. "These are real people, real emotions." The tension hung thick in the air as the reporter backed away, recognizing the weight of her words. Lisa turned back to Mrs. Ellis, who looked both grateful and exhausted. "Thank you," Mrs. Ellis whispered, tears pooling in her eyes. Hours dripped away as they waited, glued to the unfolding uncertainty. Each minute felt like a lifetime, each passing moment layered with worry. Lisa sat by Mrs. Ellis' side, memories of laughter with Kyle surfacing in her mind, now entangled with fear of what lay ahead. Finally, a doctor walked in, his gaze steady and calm. "Mrs." he called softly. The air shifted, and Lisa felt all eyes on him, anticipation thickening. "Kyle is stable for now, but he'll need surgery in the morning." Tears streamed down Mrs. Ellis' face as she nodded, a mix of relief and anxiety flickering across her features. Lisa took a deep breath, feeling a weight lift. As he left, she realized Kyle wasn't gone yet. A flicker of hope ignited in the quiet of the waiting room. They had time. The hours stretched late, and the hospital glowed with fluorescent lights flickering above them. Lisa was grateful for the time she had spent beside Mrs. Ellis, the connection forged through mutual fear and strength, but she also knew she had to confront her feelings. "I'm sorry for not being there for him," Lisa admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Through tears, Mrs. Ellis responded, "Life gets busy, but it's moments like these that remind us of what truly matters." Lisa nodded, understanding the truth behind the words. No matter how hectic life became, the bonds they shared were irreplaceable. The early morning sun rose slowly through the window, casting a golden hue across the room. As the hospital began to stir with activity, the tension in the air shifted slightly. With the day breaking, Lisa knew she needed to take control and reach out to others. "I'm going to let the team know about Kyle. They should all know," she declared, her voice steady. Mrs. Ellis smiled faintly, touched by Lisa's resolve. Once outside, Lisa sent a quick message to their coworkers, pouring her heart into every word, urging them to care. Her phone buzzed with replies, and within minutes, a small group of friends had joined her in the hospital lobby, worry etched on their faces. "We had no idea," one of them exclaimed, her eyes wide with disbelief. "It's been overwhelming," Lisa explained, frustration creeping back. As they banded together, the energy shifted. Lisa's heart surged with hope as she saw the support blooming among them. They didn't have the answers yet, but they were there united, determined to be present for Kyle and each other. The group moved back to Mrs. Ellis, a testament of solidarity and love. Every voice echoed Kyle's essence, a gentle reminder of the strength gathered against adversity. "Thank you for coming," Mrs. Ellis greeted them with gratitude, tears shimmering in her eyes. They spent the day sharing stories and memories, laughter mingling with the tears in a delicate balance of life's joys and sorrows. It was a moment so poignant, an array of experiences woven together, layered with shared empathy. Television sets in the waiting room droned on with updates about Kyle's condition, but Lisa felt renewed. She had found the balance between the chaos of life and the love binding them all together. As hours melted into the afternoon, they finally received news that Kyle would be brought into surgery. In that moment, a strange mix of hope and fear coiled tightly within each of them. The group huddled together, holding hands and sharing a prayer, channeling their hopes into the universe, uniting their breaths in the warmth of support. While they waited, Lisa began to grasp the strength of vulnerability. It took devastation to reveal the beauty of connection. No more distractions, no more overlooking the question life demanded: presence, purpose, and love. As the surgeon emerged, their spirits lifted. "He made it through the surgery successfully, but we'll need to monitor him closely," he explained. Relief flooded the room and cheers erupted, a powerful moment of strength pooling together. But the news didn't stop there. The community had also become involved, responding to the news of Kyle's accident. People started coming to offer support. Friends, old coworkers, and neighbors all joined together, turning the hospital waiting area into a gathering of love. People cared, Lisa thought as she watched the faces of those who showed up. It glimmered like hope. And as the day turned into night, surrounded by warmth and unwavering support, they reminded each other of what truly mattered: love, empathy, and reaching out. Through the chaos, Sarah had discovered clarity. This experience taught her to be present, to embrace vulnerability, and to never overlook the questions in between moments. The media continued to cover Kyle's story, but it shifted focus. Instead of sensationalizing the accident, they highlighted the community's effort to unite, showcasing the power of friendship in times of tragedy. Finally, as they each prepared to leave the hospital, Lisa reflected on everything that had unfolded. She had learned what it meant to connect, to care, and to support one another. Together, they emerged from the hospital into the cool, quiet night air. Each step felt lighter, buoyed by the love gathered around them. They walked forward, hearts intertwined, ready to face whatever life had in store. Because now they knew the most important questions were often the ones we chose to overlook. And through the storm of uncertainty, they emerged, united, stronger than ever before. Sarah's voice was casual, but a flicker of concern crossed her face as she watched Mark sit across the table, staring at his phone. They were in their favorite cafe, the air filled with the rich aroma of coffee and baked goods. She took a sip of her latte, her focus shifting back to the screen, but something felt off. Mark looked up suddenly, his expression a mix of frustration and vulnerability. "I don't know, I've been meaning to tell you something, but I'm not sure how," he admitted, fiddling with his phone case. "Just spit it out," Sarah urged, her eyes rolling slightly as she returned to scrolling through her social media feed. The moment hung heavy between them, an echo of things unspoken. Mark sighed, clearly torn. "It's just, I feel like we're not really connecting lately." She barely looked up, still absorbed by her phone. "Can we talk about it later?" He nodded, but Sarah could see the disappointment in his eyes. She didn't realize that this moment of casual dismissal was about to ripple through their lives in ways she couldn't begin to imagine. As they left the cafe, the sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows on the sidewalk. Sarah was still caught up in her online world, posting a new picture and checking for likes as they walked. The murmurs and laughter in the streets faded in and out, eclipsed by her preoccupation. But then a sound sliced through the chatter, a sudden crash followed by the wail of sirens. She glanced up, realizing that a crowd had gathered not far away. There were flashing lights from the ambulance and police vehicles, and a knot of anxiety twisted in her stomach. She asked, intrigued. "I don't know," Mark replied, his tone serious now. He moved closer to the scene, urgency in his steps. As they approached, the chaos unfolded before them. Emergency responders were rushing towards a building, and the air felt electric, charged with tension. Reporters hastily set up their cameras, desperate to capture the unfolding drama. "No way," Sarah murmured as she caught sight of a familiar face in the crowd. It was Kyle, her friend and a beloved member of the community. He was usually the one cheering people up, but now he was pale, standing frozen, his eyes glued to the unfolding chaos. Mark asked, his voice tight. "Something exploded in the building. It's bad," Kyle said, rubbing his hands together anxiously. Sarah felt her heart race. Kyle looked away, his throat working as he tried to find the words. Panic surged within her. They had always joked about the unbreakable bond of friendship between them, but now reality washed over her, stark and unforgiving. She had dismissed Mark's concerns earlier, preoccupied with her own distractions, and now here they stood on the brink of something devastatingly real. As the emergency responders moved in, the crowd murmured, whispers mingling with shouts of fear and anxiety. Sarah felt herself being pulled deep into the scene, emotions thickening the air around them. Mark turned to Sarah, something urgent in his voice. "We can't just stand here." "I don't think we should be here," Sarah protested, fear bubbling in her gut. She clung to Mark's arm as they moved closer, but Mark's eyes burned with determination. "We owe it to them to find out." In that moment, something changed within Sarah. The weight of what was unfolding forced her to confront her own reluctance. Maybe she had indeed overlooked what mattered, all those little moments leading up to this one. Suddenly, there was a flash of light, and a firefighter emerged, shouting orders into the chaos. Sirens wailed as he hurried past them. "Stay back," but Sarah could see the desperation in the eyes of the crowd. They wanted answers about their loved ones, about the people inside. Sarah yelled at the firefighters, her voice pleading. One responder snapped back. Mark looked at Sarah, a gentle resolve blooming in his eyes. "We have to wait." But the words felt empty as they stood there, uncertainty growing like an unwelcome shadow. Yet amid all the chaos, Sarah realized that everyone around her was feeling the same emotion, connection. Even in fear, they were united. As the minutes ticked by, the world outside faded. All she could feel was the weight of the moment pressing against her heart. She thought of all the times she had overlooked simple questions or brushed aside subtle cues from those she cared about, choosing to focus on her phone instead. When news broke from the gate, a paramedic approached the police officers with something heavy in their demeanor. "We've got someone out." Excitement surged through the crowd, a collective gasp punctuating the air. Hope crackled in the atmosphere, and as they rushed to see who was being rescued, Sarah gripped Mark's hand tightly. But as the paramedics emerged with a stretcher, something felt off. The The person on it was unconscious, a blanket pulled tightly over their body, hiding their face. The cheers from before faded quickly into wary silence. Someone cried out, but the paramedics wouldn't answer. They quickly loaded the stretcher into the ambulance, and with that action, Sarah's heart sank. Moments dragged into what felt like hours as more responders raced in and out, diligently trying to assess the damage. The media began to gather, eager to capture anything remotely newsworthy, their cameras flashing like a swarm of fireflies. "Get the news ready," a reporter shouted. That's when Sarah spotted a crowd forming at the edge. The realization hit like a wave. They were here for Kyle, who worked tirelessly for the community, always the first to lend a hand or bring a smile. Could it be? He was in there. The thought sent shivers down her spine. She turned, desperation rising within her. He nodded, and together they pushed toward the center of the action, where a podium had been set up. The crowd's chatter built a thick layer of tension as they echoed Kyle's name. And then, without warning, another explosion rocked the vicinity, thick clouds of dust and debris bursting into the air. People screamed, scattering like leaves in a storm. Sarah felt Mark grab her arm, pulling her back as others rushed to safety. Before she could catch her breath, someone shouted, "Kyle's still inside." Emotion rose like a tide, crashing against her heart. The weight of every moment she had taken for granted crashed over her like a tidal wave. Sarah cried, scanning for any way to help. Even in fear, she felt the pull of responsibility, a connection that went beyond words. As the chaos settled, she noticed reporters flocking around Mrs. Jenkins, an elderly woman who had raised Kyle since he was a child. "My boy is in there," she declared, defiance in her voice. Ire in her eyes burned brightly, and Sarah felt emboldened. Mrs. Sarah called, rushing towards her. "We can't stop now, he might still be inside." Mrs. Jenkins shouted, tears pooling in her eyes, but there was a glimmer of hope, a blend of pride and fear clashing within her. Sarah turned back to the crowd. "We can't let this end here." As if her words flipped a switch, the crowd began to pulse with energy. They started to chant Kyle's name, creating a momentum that carried them forward. Kyle echoed through the streets, a symphony of desperation and hope. Mark squeezed Sarah's hand, pride shining in his eyes. "You did it." And that's when it clicked for Sarah, the strength of community, the refusal to let anyone be forgotten. Despite their individual lives, they shared a bond that transcended mere acquaintanceship. Hours passed, but the atmosphere remained electric. Emergency responders continued working diligently, and with determination, they wheeled out stretchers as survivors began to emerge from the wreckage. Tears of joy and relief flowed freely as those they hoped for came true. But the truth was, Kyle hadn't been one of them yet, and a gnawing fear began to settle back in. She murmured, trying to quiet the doubt creeping in. As the crowd pushed forward, people gave their all. Reporters stood ready to capture every moment of triumph, their cameras like hungry beasts eager to record the unfolding drama. The excitement mounted. Then in the distance, an exhausted firefighter stepped forward, wiping grime from his forehead. Silence fell over the crowd as everyone held their breath, hoping he would be the voice of positivity. "Everyone," he said, voice steady yet strained. "We did find Kyle. He's alive, but he's in serious condition." Collective gasps surged through the crowd, a wave of relief and worry intertwining. Tears slipped from lips to cheeks as hope ignited within them. Mrs. Jenkins cried, her voice cracking. "He's in good hands," the firefighter assured. "We'll do everything we can." As the crowd erupted into stunned chatter, Sarah felt emotions wash over her in torrents. Relief mingled with anticipation, fear mingling with hope. The helicopter arrived minutes later, poised like a mechanical bird ready to carry Kyle. Sarah watched, heart racing, as they prepared to load him onto the chopper. "This is our moment," she whispered to Mark, who nodded solemnly beside her. In that instant, she vowed to never overlook another moment, never to dismiss the questions that mattered. He was more than a friend, he was family. They all were. Their moments were too precious to ignore, fragile as glass but made resilient through love. As Kyle was lifted into the helicopter, the crowd continued to cheer, an outpouring of solidarity and strength woven into every heartbeat. Sarah turned to Mark, tears spilling freely. "We won't forget this. We will make sure he knows how loved he truly is." And standing together as the helicopter took off, the sky painted in hues of dawn, they were reminded that in their darkest moments, it was the strength of connection that illuminated their path forward. In the aftermath, the news media spun their narratives, the community rallied around Kyle, and the connections forged through chaos grew stronger, binding them together against all odds. Because when life takes unexpected turns, it's the bonds formed in those moments that shine the brightest, illuminating the complexities of love, loss, and the unwavering human spirit. Sarah realized that this experience would forever be a lesson etched into her heart. She would never overlook a question, a moment, or a person ever again. His words echoed through the room, sharp and heavy. Julia stood frozen, disbelief mingling with the fading warmth of the conversation. Just minutes before, she and Darren had been laughing, reminiscing about their past, but now it felt like everything had shifted. "I didn't," Julia stammered, her heart racing. Darren's brows knitted together, his expression a mix of confusion and frustration. You walked away, Jules, and I'm not sure you even saw me trying to talk. The question hung in the air, thick with tension. Julia felt a twinge of guilt flutter in her stomach as she recalled how distracted she had been, her mind whirling with work deadlines, social media notifications, and endless to-do lists. I was just busy, Darren, busy or just... He turned away, disappointment weighing heavy on his shoulders. In that moment, Julia's mind raced. She opened her mouth to defend herself, but she was struck by a realization how often had she brushed aside his concerns in favor of her own distractions. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words faltered, leaving only silence hanging between them. Suddenly, a loud crash interrupted their emotional standoff, shattering the moment. Julia jumped and rushed to the window, her heart pounding. Outside, chaos unfolded. The car had collided with a storefront, glass shattered, and people were rushing forward to help. "Come on," Julia exclaimed, her voice laced with urgency, and without waiting for Darren's response, she dashed out the door. As they reached the scene, sirens wailed in the background, merging with the frantic voices of the crowd. The air buzzed with uncertainty. Julia felt a mix of adrenaline and impending dread. She pushed through the gathering crowd, desperate for answers, her instincts guiding her. She called out, searching through the sea of worried faces. A woman next to her gasped. Julia's heart sank. She spotted the crumpled vehicle, steam rising ominously. This was no minor accident, and the intensity wrapped around her like a heavy cloak. As emergency responders arrived, their voices rose above the clamor, authoritative and steady. "Step back," a firefighter shouted, tapping into the urgency of the situation. Darren was behind her, his earlier feelings forgotten, both of them drawn into this new reality. The crowd's gasps turned into murmurs of hope and despair as they waited for news. "We have to find out who it is." Julia's voice trembled with urgency, and Darren nodded in agreement, his eyes wide. Minutes felt like hours as firefighters began their work, prying open the mangled door of the car. In a frenzy, Julia pulled out her phone, capturing the chaos in front of her, but something inside her felt wrong. Was she broadcasting this moment, or was it a desperate attempt to connect? Then, as a figure emerged from the vehicle, covered in debris and soot, Julia's breath hitched. The crowd gasped, and a potent silence enveloped them. Darren asked, anxiety etched into his features. Julia replied, shifting her weight from foot to foot, unable to tear her eyes away from the scene unfolding before her. As the paramedics moved in, they worked quickly, their focused expressions carving a path through the madness. Julia could see them trying to assess the injuries, their efforts meticulous but swift. Just then, news crews arrived, instantly shifting the dynamic. Cameras began rolling, and the media descended upon the scene like a swarm. Suddenly, it wasn't just about the accident, it was about the story, the angle. The humanity of the moment began to dissolve under the bright lights. "Get out of the way," a reporter shouted, shoving people aside. The chaos twisted into something exploitative, the tragedy morphing into headlines and clickbait. Julia felt her stomach churn, a sinking realization settling deep within her. "This isn't okay," she murmured, her heart heavy. They were being drawn into the spectacle of agony, and her mind drifted back to Darren's earlier question. Had she treated this moment like just another post for her social media feed? As the media shoved their microphones and cameras into the faces of the witnesses, she felt sick. Darren's voice broke through her thoughts. He was pointing at the stage where the responders were beginning to pull someone out. She asked, breathless with anticipation. The figure slowly turned, revealing a familiar face. Her breath caught in her throat. It was Kyle, their mutual friend. Julia gasped, a mixture of relief and horror flooding her senses. Kyle looked dazed but alive. The paramedics worked tirelessly as reporters shouted questions. Their voices were intrusive, drowning out the humanity of the moment. Julia couldn't take it. "Stop." She yelled at the reporters, her voice breaking as the weight of the reality settled around her. Kyle's eyes scanned the crowd, searching for a familiar face and landing on Julia. "Help me," he mouthed, and in that instant her heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. She pushed through the throngs of people, her own voices drowned out by the chatter of the media circus. She cried, fighting her way forward. As she reached his side, the paramedics were lifting him onto a stretcher. Kyle winced in pain, but his gaze remained fixed on her, pleading. "You've got to help," he gasped, anguish in his voice. She promised, desperate to make things right. She wanted to reach into his pain, to pull him out of the darkness of this moment, but she was powerless against the reality of the scene unfolding. A paramedic directed, and Julia felt herself being pushed aside. She shouted, her heart pounding. But the chaos swelled around her, dragging her further from Kyle as they loaded him into the ambulance. In a flurry of lights and noise, she lost sight of him. The realities of the situation crashed down, the sirens, the calls for clarity, and the growing crowd straining for information. It was overwhelming, and in that instant, she felt the world split in two. She whispered, guilt wrapping around her like a heavy cloak. She had been so preoccupied with her own life, her own distractions, that she hadn't truly listened to the people she loved. Darren appeared beside her, a deep frown etched across his face. "We need to find out where they're taking him," he said, urgency sparking his voice. "I know," Julia replied, her mind racing. He asked, scanning the chaos around them. As the media began to disperse, Julia spotted Mrs. Jenkins again, her expression a mix of fear and determination. Without thinking, Julia grabbed Darren's hand and led him toward her. "Mrs. Jenkins will carry the news," she said urgently. The older woman's eyes glistened with gratitude and fear. "Thank you, dear, They all nodded in solidarity, an unspoken promise binding them in their shared anxiety. As they raced toward the nearby hospital, the sun began to dip beneath the horizon, painting the sky in shades of violet and orange. The glow offered a brief moment of peace, even in the midst of turmoil. Once they arrived, Julia felt the weight of her fear unravel slightly. "We need to find out what room he's in," she declared, scanning the entrance for any sign of the emergency staff. But as they approached the reception desk, a nurse stepped forward, her face drawn and tired. "I'm sorry, but we can't provide you with information on a patient unless you're family," she stated firmly. Julia pleaded, her heart racing. "This is his mother, Mrs. Jenkins." The nurse hesitated, and Julia could see the struggle of compassion against professionalism etched on her face. "He's in surgery. The doctor will let you know when he's stable." A collective silence fell over the small group, an air of anxious anticipation thickening the atmosphere. Darren asked, his tone respectful yet urgent. "Soon," the nurse assured, but Julia could see the uncertainty behind her eyes. They all turned away from the desk, taking a moment to gather themselves. The waiting room was filled with families, some grieving while others rejoiced. It was a tapestry of human emotion spread before them. Julia sat on the edge of a chair, fingers trembling as she gripped her phone tightly. She watched as moments of laughter and tears unfolded in the distance, life moving forward even amid tragedy. She murmured, guilt weighing heavy on her heart, "You've got to let this go, Julia." "We can't change what happened, but we can be there for him now," Darren encouraged gently, placing a comforting hand on her back. But even as he spoke, Julia felt the noise of regret swirl around her. She realized that she had let distractions overshadow her relationships, had taken valuable moments for granted. Just then, the door swung open and a doctor stepped through, his expression serious yet hopeful. He asked, glancing around the room. Julia shouted, her heart racing. Mrs. Jenkins stood, her face pale but determined. "I'm here." The doctor took a deep breath, steeling himself, and all eyes turned toward him. "Kyle made it through surgery but was severely injured. We are monitoring him closely," he explained carefully. "He's stable for now, but he will need rehabilitation." Relief washed over the group like a tide, but the reality of Kyle's condition settled in again, a long road ahead with a mountain of uncertainty. Julia felt Mrs. Jenkins' hand grip her arm tightly, the intensity of emotion running deep. "Thank you. Please let Kyle know we're here for him," she said, voice breaking under the weight of worry. As the doctor nodded and headed back down the hallway, Julia turned to Darren and Mrs. Jenkins, her heart racing with mixed emotions. "We will," Darren assured, determination in his eyes. And in that moment, Julia felt the strength of unity, a fierce bond forged through shared fears and hope. They would not allow themselves to overlook Kyle or their connection, not anymore. Just as they decided to wait together for Kyle to regain consciousness, an unsettling realization broke through the fog of uncertainty. Julia had never truly appreciated the depth of her relationships until faced with the faint possibility of loss. But suddenly, as the weight of love and support enveloped the room, a shout erupted from the hospital entrance. Everyone turned, tension shooting through the air as the reality of the moment tightened around them. "Get the camera," the voice yelled, and an unseen panic rippled through the crowd outside. Julia whispered, dread creeping back into the corners of her mind. "Something big," Darren replied, and just then a figure rushed through the entrance. The buzz of news crews flooded back to the hospital, cameras ready to capture every moment. Julia's throat went dry as the unsettling thought crept in. What if this wasn't just about Kyle anymore? Could they really handle what was about to unfold? The fear was palpable, pushing its way into the depths of her soul, and the entire room held its breath, teetering on the edge of the unknown. In that instant, everything felt poised between hope and despair, and the realization that their world was about to change enveloped them all. "Stay close," Darren whispered, tightening his grip on Julia's hand, a pulse of connection in a sea of uncertainty. But just as they braced themselves for the next wave, the door burst open, and the weight of impending change crashed down on them. "Everyone, get ready."